I am Paul Clerici. I'm from Walpole, so I'm right next door. Some of you know me. I've run the Boston Marathon myself 23 times. I've been covering it for decades, I used to be the sports editor and the editor of the Walpole Times, so some of you may remember me from that. But just being local enough, seeing runners running around all these towns. Eagle Brook Road Race, the Walpole Road Race is my own in November. So between running and writing, there's tons of stories about this race. It's almost 130 years old. And I do have several books, so if you do want to purchase them later on, just a later, is it on already? Is this on already? Okay. Okay, now is everything okay here in the background? Awesome. Okay, I won't chew gum because I can do two things at once. 3 is the limit. And if you do have any questions as I'm talking, just raise your hand. You don't have to wait till the end. And then we can address things as I'm going along. Like I said, I'll take you through the course, some of the history. So when you do watch it in a few weeks, maybe you pick up some behind-the-scenes things that a lot of the commentators may not pick up on. This is actually a mural that's in Ashland, Massachusetts. This is the first Boston Marathon. It actually started in Ashland, Massachusetts. It's in Hopkinton now. It's actually based on the Olympics, the first modern Olympic Games in 1896 in Greece. Part of the U.S. Olympic team that went to there was the BAA members, the Boston Athletic Association, which organizes the Boston Marathon. So part of our U.S. team were BAA members in Greece. And one of the events was the marathon. This is 1897. It was the second ever marathon, if you ignore the history of Philippides and the mythology of the battle of 490 BC between the Athenians and Persians. The battle occurred, but the Philippides is a mixture of a few myths of the messenger runner who would go from battle to battle, and, which was true. They did have those messengers who would run for hundreds of miles, because no cell phones back then, and convey messages. So the actual distance way back then was about 24 and a half, 25 miles. So in 1896, for the first modern Olympic Games, that March they had a marathon in Greece, sort of served as a qualifier for the Olympics. The second marathon was the actual 1896 modern Olympic Games. And the BAA members, and they did pretty well in some of the events, liked this event of the marathon. And they brought back that idea here in Boston, because at the time the BAA was only a few years old, and they had a track behind the Boston Public Library, which is no longer there. And they had what was called the BAA Games, which was a multi-event games. And they said, wouldn't it be great to end it with the marathon? So all they had to do was measure about 24 and a half miles. They couldn't go to the east because it'd be in the water. So they followed the train, which is the current commuter rail. So they followed the train that went from Boston to Ashland. It happened to be 24 and a half miles, right at the end of the Sudbury River. This building is Metcalfe's Mill, which made boxes for shoes that burned down in the 30s. And this is Pleasant Street. This is all still here except for the building that you can actually visit. And over the years, they've really made this a nice place to tour. They're going to put a little museum here and everything. It's really neat. So for the first year, they had 18 men signed up, 15 men started, and 10 finished. I don't know where the other 5 went. Maybe they're still running. I don't know. Keep an eye out for them. So the first 2 years, it actually started right here on Pleasant Street, which you can visit, like I said. This is more of a modern photo of the exact same spot. Here's the Sudbury River. Metcalfe's Mill was right here, and this was the starting line. So as you can see, it's called Marathon Park, and they have like plaques that have the history, because the first 27 years of the Boston Marathon started in Ashland before the distance grew, which I'll explain later as well. But the first 2 years, 1897, 1898, started right here on Pleasant Street, which is about a mile from the current course. This isn't the current course, but it's close enough that you can visit it. After the first 2 years, the BAA built their clubhouse on Exeter Street near the Boston Public Library, which is no longer there, the BAA clubhouse. So they wanted the marathon to finish in front of their clubhouse, so they had to tweak the start and finish. So what they did is after the first 2 years, the finish line moved to just about here. There's a bridge that goes over the commuter rail. So for the next 6 or 7 years, if you stand here, you can actually see the start. It started over here, so it could finish in front of the clubhouse. Then they had about 30 or 40 runners on the bridge, and they're like, oh, that's too many. We got to move the starting line again, not knowing it's going to be 30,000 in 3 weeks, right? So they moved it for a third time on Route 135 in front of the senior center. There's a big farmland there. It's actually the current 4-kilometer mark. So a lot of runners don't realize when they run on Patriots Day, when they get to the 4-kilometer mark of the current course, it's the last of the 3 times it started in Ashland, was on that. So it was there for about a dozen years, and then thanks to the royal family, nothing against them, but in the 1908 Olympics in England, the royal family wanted to see the marathon start at Windsor Castle, and finish in front of the royal box in the track. In order for that to happen, they had to add a little extra mile, and so they went from 24.5 to 26.2. It's the only reason the universal distance of the marathon is 26.2 miles, because of the royal family. So that's how. So it became the universal distance, and every marathon now has it. New York, Chicago, Boston. So Boston just had to walk up Route 135 until they reached 26.2, and it just happened to be Hopkinton. If Ashland was bigger, which I think at one point it was, it'd still be in Ashland. But after 27 years in 3 different spots in Ashland, it's in Hopkinton now. And what's interesting is Frank Shorter, who you'll see, one of our great American marathoners, he won the Olympic gold in 1972 marathon, silver in 76. He always jokes, half jokingly, that when he runs the marathon and gets to about 24 or 25 miles, he curses the Royals. He's like, I'd be done right now. Why'd you add that on? But that's the only reason. Some things are very simple like that. This is the athletes' village. All the runners, except for the elite athletes, gather before the race. This is behind Hopkinton High School, Hopkinton Middle School. In the older days, way back when, you just go right to the high school, get your bib number, and run that morning. You didn't have to wait. It wasn't until 1969 that there were 1,000 runners. So from 1897 to 1969, there were either dozens of runners or hundreds. It wasn't a big, huge race runner-wise, so you could just walk up to Hopkinton. Then it became, my first year of running, it was 1990. I think there was like 9,000 runners. So it still was pretty manageable. Like I say, it's 30,000 now. But the BAA anticipated for this centennial in 1996, the 100th Boston Marathon, they knew they were going to get a lot of bandits, unofficial runners. It would just clog up everything. So they got ahead of that and said, let's have a lot of runners. Let's do some extra. So they made it up to 38,000, which was a lot, 8,000 more than we have now. But now you had to sort of accommodate all those people. So they create this village, which they still do now. There's a few things from the 100th that they still do now. The expo where you pick up your bib number is now 3 days long. Used to be just 1 day. So there are a few things from the 100th that they still incorporate now. And this is one of them, the village. This is 7/10 of a mile from the starting line. One of the side streets that goes right up to Main Street. So this is right behind the high school, middle school's right here. And you'll see this on TV, all the runners from Boston area getting bussed here, and the school buses just going back and forth. You can get dropped off nearby. But everyone congregates here, and most big marathons do that, like New York City Marathon. Everyone goes to Staten Island for several hours ahead of time. So most big races like this, you'll have an athlete's village, which we just didn't have for the longest time. But that's what it looks like. And if it rains and that's all muddy, that's a lot of fun, which I've had that. That's where you get your plastic bags you put over your sneakers and you walk around so you don't get all mud. This one I took about 10 years ago of Hopkinton Common, and there's Frank Shorter right there, actually, the 1972 Olympic gold medalist on the bottom left corner. The year of the photo, he was running for Channel 5 or 4, I think. He was mic'd up. So while he was running, he was giving reports. It was part of the coverage of the race, which was pretty neat. And I'm fascinated by this photo for a number of reasons. I got to know Frank over the years. He lives in Falmouth right now, too. I remember showing him this photo years later, and he looked at this and goes, hey, I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to do, lying down before the race. I'm like, you're Frank Shorter. Of course. He goes, I know, but we don't always do what we preach. I was like, oh, that's true. But I always get a kick out of the fact that people are just walking around not realizing this is one of the greatest athletes in American history, and all walking around thinking this is some guy who's going to run the race lying down, like a normal guy. But it's one of our legends. And these white houses here is Hayden Row. It's a side street. From 1965 to 1985, the race started actually on the side street. And the gun would go off at noon, back when it was a noontime start, and everyone ran really fast for about a couple hundred yards and then take a right onto Main Street. I don't know why they did that. Now everyone's on Main Street, as you see, and then you just run straight ahead. But for those 21 years, you started right on a side street. which was kind of annoying. I don't know why I did that. And the famous "It All Starts Here" sign, which everyone takes their pictures near. And there's a lot of neat monuments. There's Johnny Kelly Crossing. There's two crosswalks behind the bandstand. At the intersection is a plaque. It says Johnny Kelly Crossing. There's a bunch of statues. The Team Hoyt statues down. This is Ash Street, right down here, about a block. Rick and Dick Hoyt. This is the other side of the Common. This is George V. Brown with the starter's pistol. This is called the Starter. There's been a Brown family member for years starting one of the races. Now it's the great-great-granddaughter, I think, of George. Since the beginning, the Brown family, going back to Walter Brown, who owned the original Celtics, the original Boston Arena, which is now Matthews Arena at Northeastern, where the Celtics and Bruins played. They were BAA members. The Brown family is very integral in Boston sports. So it's nice to have a little homage to him. He's actually facing the starting line. Main Street's right about here. This is also the BAA headquarters in Hopkinton, and which is kind of neat. This window right here, you can just see like a little yellow on that corner. It's the silhouette of the unicorn, which is the logo of the race. And each day, as it gets closer to the race, the unicorn sort of magically moves to the middle of the window until Patriots Day morning, it fills the whole window, the silhouette. So keep an eye on that when you watch it on TV. I don't know where he goes the rest of the year. Maybe he goes around the back of the house and comes back. I don't know. And now actually the logo is switched to the right, so now he's got to go the other way because the unicorn is facing to the left, and they switched the logo. Now he's facing to the right, so maybe they're moving it around. But it's a great area to go to. There's a lot of different things to see, even when it's not the marathon. In addition to running Boston 23 times, I've also run 20 other marathons in different states and countries. And I got to say, Boston does, not just because it's ours, they do a lot of little things that other places don't do. And one of them is this. This is marathon weekend, where you can go up and just have your picture taken at the starting line in the middle of the street, and the police will stop traffic for you. I mean, people are lining up. It's really neat. You know, it's just, they're surprised that they're not going to get hit. I mean, you do this in New York, and it's a different photo in New York. But it's really neat. They'll actually do that, and most people don't beep because they understand and see this nice, beautiful starting line, which for decades, Jack LeDuc, local guy, would paint this really big, lots of different colors. Every year he would add a little personal touch. I think like the first year we had wave starts. Like I said, for decades at noon, the gun would go off and everyone would go. Man, woman, and child, all the time. Then we incorporated wave starts, which was like every minute 1,000 runners would go in a corral, and it spread it out along the course to help all the towns. So the first year those wave starts, he painted blue waves on the starting line. So every year is something different. It's really neat personal touch that a lot of races don't do that we do in Boston, which I think is great. This is awesome. This is the start. In the old days, we filled the whole street from curb to curb. It's a little better now. It's a little more fine-tuned. Dave McGilvey, the race director, fixed this. A natural bottleneck would occur. So say you're down here, and the gun will go off. It would take you forever to get to the start because it was wider here and more narrow at the starting line. So what Dave McGilvey did, the race director, is he measured different points. And right around here is the widest part of 89 feet, and at the starting line is 35 feet. So it was just that narrow. So what he did is he measured, and you'll see this on TV if you ever wondered why. He measured 25 feet, and he put police fencing for 25-foot width from the start all the way down to the base of the hill. So you may wonder why there's space from the fence to the curb. You know, part of the street is not used for runners. He did that to streamline it. And I remember thinking the first year he did this, because I ran from 1990 to 2012, all those years. So a lot of the changes, big changes, occurred while I was running. And I'm thinking, if you kind of shrink it to 25 feet, you're pushing us farther down. It's going to take longer. But the gun went off, and because it was a streamlined 25 feet, we just flew. It was really quick. And he's like, hey, that's why I get paid the big bucks. So it worked. It was really neat. I didn't think because we were farther down, but because it was streamlined, it worked out great. And he still does that, which is excellent. This is the 1 mile mark, and you go by the statue called the Spirit of the Marathon. It's pretty close to the course, so you can see it any time. It's at the Weston Nurseries in Hopkinton. They have a nice little patio here. They grow shrubbery and trees, a nursery there. So you can visit this all the time. You can park next to it. it's amazing. There's two gentlemen here, if you can just see. There's an identical statue in Greece. The gentleman on the left here is Stylianos Kyriakidis, the Greek who won Boston in 1946. His son, Dimitri, thought it'd be a great idea to recognize his father when the Olympics returned to Greece in 2004. He thought, wouldn't it be great to have a statue here and in Greece? There's two identical. Tewkesbury sculptor Mikko Kaufman created it. So it's a long story about how he got it there. But the short version is kind of interesting. There's a marathon, the original marathon in Greece, marathon to Athens. He wanted the statue at the start, but the mayor agreed and the mayor changed, didn't want it. Then the new mayor at a different part of the course said, we'll take it, but we want another statue of Spiridon Louis, the Greek who won the original 1896 Olympic marathon. So Mikko Kaufman, I mean, it's not a painting where you can just paint another guy, it's a statue. So he thought about it and he created a second body, Spiridon Louis on the right, and sort of just stuck it to the back of Kyriakidis. But what he did, and you can kind of see this in the photo here, is Kyriakidis is running on the top of the statue, which replicates some of the ground of Greece. And Spiridon Louis is running alongside, but his feet don't touch the ground. So what he thought of, which was a great idea, is that Spiridon Louis won the marathon in 1896. 50 years later, 1946, Kyriakidis ran and won Boston along with the spirit of Spiridon Louis, because he's not touching the ground. That's how he got the name of it. So it's a pretty neat way to solve a problem, number one, but also make it. It's a beautiful statue if you see. It's a lot of details when you get close up to it. Very big, as you can see. And this is Ashland. After you run through Hopkinton, you do sort of return to Ashland. The earlier photos I showed you are kind of over the tree lines. As a crow flies, it's probably about a mile that way. So it is pretty close to see the original start. So if you do visit the area, it's not that far. Basically, if you're right here on Main Street, you just go straight to the set of lights in Ashland. You take a left onto Main Street and take a left onto Pleasant. You're there. It's like a big U. So if you do want to travel to see it, it's pretty easy to get to. But it's interesting when you enter Ashland. They always say this on TV when you watch it: don't go fast. You know what I mean? Because the marathon, you've been training for months, years. You know, you've annoyed your family. You're just really psyched up for this, and the gun goes off and you just want to take off, but it's downhill. You want to conserve your energy, but the start is actually downhill too, so that doesn't really help you. What was interesting in 1988, I think 89, there's a couple of things that happened that they changed. Dave McGilvey fixed. You may have seen this in the photos. Back then, again, noontime start. The wheelchair athletes started about 5 minutes earlier. So the road was a little slick that morning. It had just been paved that week, and then there was a mist, so you know how the road can get a little slick like that. So the wheelchair athletes back then didn't have those really nice aerodynamic wheelchairs. It was almost the vertical hospital chairs back then. And the wheelchair athletes went down, and they were sliding over on the slick pavement here, and they bumped into each other. They fell off. They fell into the grass. They tumbled. It wasn't a good scene. They weren't bothered. They were athletes. They'd pick themselves up and continue, but it just didn't look good. And then 5 minutes later, when everyone else started, back then they had a rope across the front of the lead runners with a volunteer on each side. And as a 10-second countdown started, they would drop the rope and kind of scooch it off. Well, that year, the same year, they were a little slower getting the rope. The gun went off. The runners tripped over the rope. Same year. So Dave had to fix that, McGilvey. So he said he kind of got the job by fixing it. With the wheelchair athletes, they don't do this anymore, but they did back then, is he would have a controlled start. So all the wheelchair athletes would be together, and there'd be a vehicle in front of the wheelchair athletes. Gun would go off, and they would go down this hill, but they couldn't race yet. They had to stay in their lanes and everything with the vehicle in front until they get right about here. There's a white line painted where it kind of leveled off. Then they could go. So that way they weren't really racing down the hill. They would wait till about here, and then the lead vehicle would then go, and then they could start racing. That worked for decades, and then when the wheelchair itself got much, much better, they don't do that anymore because now you can control it. It's so aerodynamic. And for the runners, instead of a rope going across, they have volunteers. They still do this. You'll see this on TV. There's like 20 or 30 volunteers shoulder to shoulder, like standing right in front of the runners. And as the countdown starts, the volunteers separate. So there's no longer a rope. So then when the gun goes off, the runners, there's nothing impeding them. So Dave always joked that solving those problems, he got the job. He goes, That's good or bad? I don't know yet. Like 50 years later, 40 years later. Now you're entering Framingham at the 8-kilometer mark, around 5 miles. You'll see us on TV. The roads start getting wider. New England roads, narrow, wide throughout the whole course here. So you'll start to see runners sort of start to get their pace a little bit. The elite athletes are still grouped together. There's like 30 or 40 elite men and women. They go off ahead of time, so you'll see them grouping together. The race really hasn't started yet, but you'll see in Framingham as it opens up a bit. Also the weather, I always put this in, and if I'm at a running club speaking, I'll hear groans because that means they ran. This is 2018. This is actually just about the 6-mile mark. Doesn't it look like they've run like 20 at this point? This was the year it was just this wind-swept, cold rain the whole time. It was bad. I mean, the legs are red. I mean, it's 6 miles, and they're all, because you figure they were at the village for like an hour or two, standing in line. Then they start the race. It was just a bad. A couple of the years that I've run, it was worse than this rain-wise, but not temperature-wise. One of the years that I ran, it was the closest that they've said of canceling the race was when a hurricane came through. And it said that was the closest. I think this was 07 or 08, something like that. But the fact that you saw an opening in the weather forecast, he didn't cancel it. That was the closest he came to it. It was just hurricane, the winds and the heavy, heavy rain, but was not this cold. I mean, pick your elements, but when it's cold, your body temperature just doesn't like it. You can't do anything about it. And like I said, this photo's not blurry. That's the rain, that's the wind. This is 6 miles in Framingham. So, I mean, God love these guys who did this. It's just, I mean, that was really cold staying there, but I can just jump in my car for that photo. Also, Framingham, like I said, the roads really get wider here. The Amtrak train is on the left. It sort of parallels the course for a good amount of miles, which is great because they'll beep to kind of cheer you on. Where the set of lights are, the commuter rail goes across here, so the tracks can get dangerous if it's cold and rainy. I mean, they're pretty level, but you can catch your toe. The wheelchair athletes going over, it's no problem because they're cutting across the rails, so they're not going parallel to it. But interestingly, in 1908, it's funny now because I don't think anyone's around anymore. In 1908, there was about a half a dozen runners who were in the lead, and they kept hearing the train getting louder and louder, and thinking this isn't going to stop. And they turned around and it just kept coming on the train here, the tracks. So they ran really fast over these tracks, continuing forward, and they turned around, and sure enough, the train just cut right off course. All the other runners had to wait for about a minute and a half. So 6 runners are on one side of the train, and they're going, oh, thanks. Thanks for the block. And then all the other runners are going, come on, let's go. So that happened one year, but every once in a while, I will joke with Dave McKeover if he has a train schedule. He goes, it's not going to happen. They know there's a race going on. They don't cut across. But it is the commuter road. It's a normal route, just not that day. But that'd be kind of interesting. And the winner did come from those lead 6, obviously. They were happy with that. And then when you go into Natick from Framingham, hills start here. Some of these photos I put in because you won't really see these kind of angles on camera when they're covering it, just because the camera is in front of the runners. So there are little hills actually early. Nothing big, nothing bad. Your regular training should take care of these hills. The big hills don't start, obviously, till Newton Wellesley area, which I'll get to. But you'll start to see that, and the roads sort of widen out. Although one town to the other is kind of funny. I always get a kick out of when one town does their road work and pavement, and they stop right at the next town, right? So you can see which town did their pavement. I don't know if that's a New England thing or not, but it's kind of funny. Still in Natick here, you get the lake on the right, where legend has it Tarzan Brown one year. The configuration was a little different, no guardrail. In the 30s, it was really hot, and during the race, he jumped in, cooled himself off, came back out, and continued running, and then he ended up winning as well. What he actually did is he sat sort of on the edge and cooled his feet off, because as you know, in the heat, your feet can swell. It was really hot, but I like the legend story better. I like to see him jumping right in, right? But there's always been a Red Sox game since the 50s, give or take cancellations. In early morning, so when the marathon started at noon, it was timed in such a way, because the game's like at 10:30 or so, the game would end about the time the leaders would be going through Kenmore Square, when it was a noontime start for the marathon. Now there's, I don't know, 9, 10 starts, between like 5 of 9 and 11:30, between the elite athletes, the wheelchair athletes, and the waves of runners. So it's not as precise, but it's still, the game ends around the time runners start to get to Kenmore Square or the mile to go. So you get 20 or 30 extra spectators jamming Kenmore Square. It's really exciting. And the smell of Italian sausage is awesome. After you're running, you know, it'd kill you if you took a bite, but it just smells so good because your body is hungry. It needs nutrition. Not that the Italian sausage is nutritious, but it smells great. But it's interesting. You'll get Red Sox updates on the radio. You'll hear it. You have the kids giving you updates. And every once in a while, when I would be running, you start to, you know, run with the same people who have the same pace as you, you know, strangers that you don't know, but you start to settle in. And once or twice, I'd be running with someone from a different country. And I remember one year there was like a German accent or something, like a hard accent, and he's coming up to me, and we see these signs, and he would say, "What's a socks?" I'm like, "What? You know, what kind of running here?" I go, "What?" He goes, "Socks. I see socks." And he pointed to this. I'm like, "Oh, socks. Oh, yeah, you wouldn't know. Professional Baseball League, Boston Red Sox is our team. There's a game." I was explaining the whole thing. "Oh, everyone's going to go Sox." I go, "I didn't know what Sox is." So it was kind of funny seeing it through someone else's perspective. Probably like if I ran in Europe and they had soccer games, I don't know some of their teams' names. So it's kind of like that, but it was interesting the way he was saying it. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's the Sox." This is Natick Center right here. So about 10-mile mark. The road narrows a little bit, and you'll get the spectators a little closer. It's kind of neat here, about 10 miles. I mean, you're really warming up at this point. The American Legion building's a little different now. You would hear the flag waving. It was really neat. But they redid this building. And right here was an open alley area. It's still there. It's not built on yet. And they would have like a flatbed truck, and this guy would be singing. He'd be with a microphone. He'd have his like sequin Neil Diamond shirt on with a button collar and everything, and he'd sing like Sinatra and Neil Diamond and Tom Jones song. Excellent voice, and he'd sing for the whole time. If you're a spectator, he just had like a 4-hour concert. He was really good because you could hear him as you approach, and you knew all the songs. We're all singing as we're running. We're all singing along with him. It was great. I mean, he sounded really good. I hope he still does that. There's a flatbed right here that he would stand on. Some spectators will go where there's entertainment. There's entertainment throughout the whole course. Like I said, I ran 23 years in a row, and there's certain places where high school kids would be playing on their driveway because the roads are closed, you can't go anywhere. And after a few years, the kids are getting good. If you run year after year after year, and I remember sometimes that I'd be running near somebody who had also ran several years in a row, and we would hear the improvement of the kids each year and go, "You guys are getting good, this is excellent," because it'd be the same kids. And they would usually play the Rocky theme or something like that, but they did well. The other side of Natick Center, get the fire department right here. And it can be hot in April, obviously. I mean, look at today, it rained, and now the sun's out. So it's New England in April. For decades, up until 1969, the road race was run, which still is on Patriots Day, but it was April 19th. So for all those decades, whatever day of the week April 19th was on was the marathon. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's when the marathon was run, unless it was a Sunday. It wasn't until 1969 it changed to the third Monday in April, which it is now. So it all changed. So you had that whole, gamut of weather in April. And so mostly it can be hot in the fire department as well, but spectators would have these hoses. The year I took this photo was 2012 when it was in the 80s and 90s. And we knew that going in. It was a tough day. So they rolled out their hazmat tunnels, about 10, 15 feet long, and the showers coming in from the inside. The firefighters use this after they battle a fire to wash off their uniform. They go through this, but they rolled it out for us so we could run or walk through it, as this gentleman did, just to cool ourselves off. When I reached Wellesley in 2012 running, there's a bank on the side that had time temperature, flashing the light. And when I got to Wellesley, it said 91. And I'm like, really? I needed to know that? It's like, put an egg on the sidewalk, I'll know it's 91. I didn't really need to know. But it was neat having this little tunnel. You went through a couple of times and you dry off. It's like that Florida heat, you dry off really quickly. But it felt good anyway going through that. Another thing in Natick, and I don't think this gentleman does this anymore, someone told me, there's this open space between two houses, and it was an engineer who lived in the area, and he would build something on a flatbed, and roll it up, and the neighborhood kids and everything would watch the race from it. Like I say, these roads are closed, so you got nothing else to do but barbecues and stuff. So this year, again, this is a flatbed truck, and here's a neighborhood on top of the Fenway left field wall with the Coke bottle and the foul pole. It's really neat doing that. This year, this is actually not real. He built like a dollhouse facade on the flatbed. This isn't a house in the middle of these two houses. And you see the spectators standing on the ceiling watching the race. This year he built the Eiffel Tower on a flatbed, and there are people standing on it. And this year must have been the year that the Zakim Bridge was built, the real one. He built a replica of the Zakim Bridge, and there's people standing on it, and he drew a little water, and it's a flatbed. So he would do this every year. It was really neat in Natick. As a runner, we didn't know what it was, so it's kind of neat looking to see. I don't think he does this anymore, unfortunately, but it was as a runner, you don't do too much by, you run and you look around. So it's neat seeing these things like that. Also in Natick, St. Nick is there, taking a break. When I ran this in 1990, I didn't know Santa was going to be there. So I took this photo in 2012, so there's not too many runners, and we're passing out at this point. But when I first started running, I was running faster as well. And there was more people here. So I'm on the right side, and some of my friends were on the left side. And it's a little incline, so you tend to tilt forward, and I wear a hat, so you're not really looking ahead, you're looking sort of in front of you like that. So as I'm running up, I look up and I see these, bright, shiny black shoes and these bright red pants. I'm going, that's weird. So as I lift my head, I see this guy with a big red jacket and a real beard, and it was Santa going, "You boys and girls have been good." And I was like, wow, this is way early for a hallucination here. This is like 11 miles. I go, something's wrong. And it's real guy, real beard and everything. And when I finished, I asked my friends, and no one saw him. So I'm thinking, uh-oh, maybe I got to get something checked. So the next year I ran, 1991, the following year, brought a little camera, a fanny pack, kind of remembered where he was. So I stayed on the right side. Sure enough, he was there. So I walked, not this photo, but I walked up the sidewalk to take his picture. And this little guy from behind, who I didn't even see because he was really small, came from behind, and he's wearing red and green with a hat with a bell on the front. I'm going, wow, I'm really in trouble. I'm seeing little guys now. And he goes, "Hey, you want your picture taken with Santa?" I was like, "Oh, you're real, yes." So I took the picture, showed my friends, and they go, "Oh, okay, he's real." So he's there every year. God love him. And then, like I say, this year's 2012, he took his jacket off because it's like 90. So I took the picture of this for my book, and I said, "How's Santa doing?" And he goes, "Santa does not like this kind of weather." And I said, "Yeah, neither do I." We don't either. But he's out there. He waved for me and stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see Santa in April. And it gives you a smile. I mean, it's you're still within the first half of the race, but it just changes your brain cells, and you're happy seeing Santa, if you've been good. Now when you enter Wellesley, with Wellesley College on the right here, you get into about halfway around here, and you see it on TV. You're still chugging along. No one's really making any moves yet. But here's another thing that Boston does that's very unique. The little no parking sign, because you can't park on the course, obviously. But instead of just having the DPW no parking sign, they add a runner, if you can see, breaking the tape. That's pretty neat. I mean, you didn't need to do that. It's like a nice little personal touch. And once in a while, if you see, like at the finish line, you see a runner cross the finish line holding one of those over their head. Obviously, they stole it off the pole, but there's thousands of these, so I'm sure the town's like, just take them. It's less work we have to do. But it's a neat little touch. It's a real no parking sign that the DPW uses throughout the whole course. It's kind of neat, a little personal. This is a neat photo, a great story. This is Mungar Hall, Wellesley College. This is the Scream Tunnel. There's women on both sides of the runners in the early days, because there's no fencing, and they just cheer. They do not stop. You hear them before you see them as you approach on 135. The train's on this side here, so it could be the train, but it's usually the women. And this dates back to the beginning. In 1897, there was a Harvard runner, and some of the women knew him, so they came out and cheered him on. No TV, they don't know when he's coming out, dirt roads, 15 guys, so it took them a while probably to find him. Or wait for him. But they, other than 1 year where April 19th was on their Easter break, they've been here and they've done this every year to cheer you on. And I'll tell you, you feel it. It's like a thunder. I remember a couple of times just running up, and somebody near me who just first year running Boston or something would hear this like this din of noise. And they said, "Oh, is that the train coming?" And I said, "Well, it could be, but it's probably about 400 women cheering you on." And if it was a guy, they go, "Really?" Okay, excellent. And everyone, starts to dust themselves off because they want to look good. In 1996, for the centennial, with 38,000 runners, the BEA needed, as much road space as possible. As you can see, the women and most spectators really closed in on those old photos, like Bill Rogers winning. The spectators are pretty close up to the runners. But for 1996, with 38,000, you kind of need as much road as you can. So the BEA started putting fencing just to separate spectators. So the women now are just on the campus side. They're no longer also on the runners left, but they're still equally as loud, believe me. And what you'll see, and they may not say this on TV, they may not know, but they may not point this out, the fencing that they're standing behind, all those signs, go Johnny and good luck or whatever. When social media started, the women of Mungar Hall created this account that for about a 2 or 3 week period, either it's just ended or it's going on right now. If you're from a different country or a different state and you can't make it, but your kid's running or whatever, you can send a message to the college students, "Hey, can you say, 'Good luck, Johnny from Texas,' whatever, mom and dad?" And they will, for a couple of weeks, have a big room like this. They put poster boards on it, and they'll paint the signs, and they will put it up. So all those signs, the women do. It's amazing, that nice little connection. I don't know any other race that does something like that. It's amazing. They have a Facebook page, send out messages, what you want us to write, and we'll make little posters. It'll be great. So all those signs, they make, the women of Mungar Hall. So it's really neat. They really get into this. And I'll tell you, this is just before the halfway point in the middle of Wellesley. So it's really getting your second wind mentally. You should be in shape to get through, but really get you going. And they're there every year. It is awesome. This is coming out of Wellesley. Here's the Newton-Wellesley town line right here. You're approaching 16 miles. Right around here, this is the first real hill. The marquee hills everyone talks about, the Newton Hills, obviously. They deserve it. And up until about here, you're running the same pace, and you'll see this on TV, and a good commentator will mention this, that 13, 14 miles, you're kind of running the same, using the same leg muscles, same stride for the most part, but you should really start to stretch it out a little bit here, because for the hills, you use a different stride, you lift your legs differently, so you want to get sort of prepared for those hills. You don't want to just change your stride on the hills. So right here, the Newton-Wellesley Falls, before you get to the 95 overpass, sort of where Pillar House was, that area, is a dip, as you can see. This is the elite women a couple of years ago, and it starts to spread out. The elite men and women refine their focus. They start to, okay, this is the next stage. We kind of had fun for 14 miles. All right, let's buckle down a little bit. For us normal runners, it's still tough. But for them, they were probably asleep for 14 miles. it's nothing to them. Now they're like, okay, this is the first dip, and then I'll be going over the hill. So they start to, check each other out, see who's maybe suffering, who's not suffering. Here's the other side of the Newton, entering Newton, the Newton-Wellesley line. So now you can see it kind of went down from the previous photo, and now you kind of come up, and 16 miles right around here, and then you take a bend to the left, and you go over 95. So you really see how that incline over 95 is. I mean, when you drive this, who cares? You're driving it, you don't even know it. But when you're running over Route 95, this is tough. And if it's a hot day, as you can see, you're getting smoked. If it's a rainy day, there's no trees on the bridge. The cars going underneath do beep, which is good. They're either annoyed that they couldn't take the exit or they're supporting you, so take it as support, because the exits obviously are closed. So as you come up on this hill, now you're going over 95, straight toward the Newton-Wellesley Hospital. And you got a good flat recovery mile between the golf courses and Newton-Wellesley Hospital to the fire station. So when you see this on TV, the elite athletes will really start to focus more here. They just did that little hill behind them. They just went over 95, and they're going to take a right onto Commonwealth Avenue at the fire station. This is when it really begins here. This is the first of the 3 hills. Now these are the hills. The hills themselves aren't that bad. A lot of people train. I've done that. I've been dropped off at Newton-Wellesley. It's 5 miles from here to Boston College. They're doing it now, training here. It's just where it is in the course. You've already run 17 miles, and then you're doing the hills. It's going to hurt. But the hills themselves, there's a side road called Carriage Road that sort of parallels Commonwealth Avenue. And people train on that the weekends look like road races. There's that many people training. It's amazing. But the hills start here, and you'll start to see the elite athletes sort of break away or get tighter and closer bunches from here. And even from this first hill to Heartbreak Hill, which is about 20 and a half miles right before Boston College, right near the Johnny Kelly statue, which is right here. This is 19.1 miles, the Young at Heart statue. Here's Walnut Street that cuts across, and here's Commonwealth Avenue, part of the course. This is 19.1, near where Newton City Hall is, about a mile before Heartbreak Hill, so you're still doing the hills. When this statue was dedicated, it's Young at Heart because the Frank Sinatra song that Johnny Kelly always sang. He wanted to make it to 102. He made it to 97 in 2004, and he ran every day. It was amazing. He won Boston in 1935, 1945. U.S. Olympian, came in twice, second 7 times, one of our greatest marathoners and athletes. Lived down the Cape in Dennis. And it's a beautiful statue. It's him in the 30s holding hands with himself in the 90s. Because he started a record 61 Bostons and finished a record 59. So he connects decades. So it was a neat idea. The creator of this actually had this as a dream. Wouldn't it be great having Johnny Kelly with himself? And that's how it came. It was dedicated in 1993, about a block up the road right here. And it was facing the direction of the runners, so the runners could see it. But a couple of months after the dedication, a car hit it and broke its arm. Boston drivers, what are you doing on the sidewalk, right? So they fixed it and they moved it here, about 80 feet in from the course, and now he's facing the direction of the runners. I wish it was a little closer so the runners could see it in the marathon. You really can't unless you really crane your neck. But it's a great meeting place. When people train, they'll start here, or they'll meet their running group here, and they'll go up and down the hill. So it's a real good central location. I took this photo very early on. There's lots of trees behind it now. It's grown since, but it's a really neat statue. I'm glad they have it right here. And again, it's about a mile from Heartbreak Hill with his connection. In 1935, like I said, he won. So 1936, he was favored. He's a local. We all wanted him to win. So around here, he was behind Allison Brown, Allison Tarzan Deerfoot Brown from Rhode Island, one of a great marathoners. He's won Boston. So Johnny was behind Allison, and by the time he got to about Boston College, a little bit before, around 20 and a half miles, he caught up to Allison Brown, sort of tapped him on the back, kind of like, it's my race now, I got it, which sort of woke up Allison, and Allison just took off and won. And Johnny faded to 5th place. Jerry Nason, the sports editor of the Globe, who's covering all these races back then, said that move broke Johnny's heart, and it morphed into Heartbreak Hill at about 20 and a half miles. I got to know Johnny over the years, and I asked him about this, everyone did, and all the other races. He said, yeah, of the 7 second places, I should have won like half of those. He goes, you don't do something stupid. I was a cocky kid. I was a defending champion. You don't do that. When you catch up to someone, you continue. You don't antagonize, especially someone as great as Allison Brown. He goes, yeah. I go, well, and this was like decades later. I'm talking to him, and you could tell it bothered him still. And I'm like, well, you won twice. You went to your 36 Olympics and this and that. He goes, I know, but these are the ones that stick with you. Like, all right. That's how we are, right? It's like, he's one of our greatest athletes, but that's what an athlete does. So this is Boston College at 21 miles at Gaston Hall. So just at the top of Heartbreak Hill. And the spectators are great. They cheer you on. If they see you coming and you're struggling. I had times that, like I was saying, I'm the youngest of 3 brothers, and I've been yelled at all the time. And I've been coming up this hill. There's a couple of times I was really struggling, and I was getting yelled at that I almost punched the guy because just initially go, oh, wait, you're supporting me. They will yell at you in a good way. It's amazing. They will yell like a drill sergeant. It breaks you out of whatever funk you're in just to at least snap you out of it. And some will still walk up Heartbreak, but then you got to kind of get a second wind at here, and then you go downhill. They will cheer you on. They kind of see you coming and struggling. It's amazing, the spectator support. And TV usually has a commentator or a reporter down here filming that area throughout the course. And usually they'll grab a runner to talk to because you're walking. Some runners will walk in and they go, yeah, I'll talk. What do you want to know? It's funny because give me something to do. But it changes your thought, which is great. So when you're cheered on like that, it's really neat. And it just breaks you out of your funk. Now, the other side of that hill, of the 21-mile mark, is here. You're entering Brighton, BC, still on your right. Moore Hall looks a little different. But this is a tough stretch. The green line starts here, so there's no spectators on the runner's left because of the tracks. There's a cemetery right around the corner. You've just run all the real big hills, so you're sort of physically drained. You still have, at this point, about 4 miles, so it's not too bad, but it's 4 miles. You want to be done by this point. This can get cold because it's wide open. The wind can start to whip around. Interestingly, with Boston, when you run from the start to the fire station, you're basically going straight. When you take a right onto the fire station that you just saw previously, you'll get the ocean breeze from the Atlantic, even though it's far away. It's the first real turn of the Boston Marathon. So you can get a cold breeze, and it can chill you, even though you're miles away from the water. And sometimes the runners will drop out, and they'll put on those silver miler blankets, to kind of conserve the heat. So as a runner, you look to your left, and you'll see runners who have dropped out on the train. You're kind of like, I don't want to see that. The temptation's too much because this is the green line takes you right into Boston. And you'll see runners kind of, not, look, I don't want to see this because it's too tempting. And right around the hill, around the bend, you go down Chestnut Hill Ave to Cleveland Circle, give you a sense of where you are. And you take a left onto Beacon, and Beacon just takes you right into Kenmore Square. It's about a 3-mile run or so, 2 or 3, from Cleveland Circle to Kenmore Square. But you get these little hills that edge up and down. And they can work on you if you're not focused on them. First couple of years I ran Boston, I thought it was flat. Oh, the hills are done. It's flat all the way in. And I would struggle. I wouldn't figure out why. And I was asking Dave McGilvery about it. And he goes, Paul, there's hills on Beacon Street. He goes, you can see the skyline. I go, no, you can't. And he goes, Paul, look up. So, because when you go up a little hill without knowing it, like I say, you tilt forward. I have a hat on. I'm not really looking straight ahead. So one year, like for this photo here, 23 miles on Beacon Street, I look up and, hey, there's the skyline. I was like, well, he's right, again. And it's good, bad news. Good news is there's the Hancock Tower. There's your finish line. Bad news is to be able to see that, I must be kind of high on the course. That means I have to go down the hill. So it's like mentally, you're like, ugh. And you have a few hills like this. So when you see us on TV, you'll start to see viewpoints from the helicopter coverage of the elite athletes. Some races have been won and lost on Beacon Street, because you'll fight back and forth, and these hills will just work on your legs if you haven't trained well as an elite athlete, because you're really pushing hard. If you're next to a runner, you want to separate, you're pushing hard on these hills. This can be a tough stretch for a lot of runners. Also, Brookline, this being Brookline, reminded me with the recent passing of Kitty Dukakis, Governor Dukakis' wife. He lived in Brookline, still does. And when he was a high school kid, he ran Boston in about 3.5 hours. Pretty good for a high school senior. And I did a story about the wreaths, the champion wreaths that the elite athletes get, those gold dip wreaths. They're actually made in Greece. There are the tremendous history, which I wrote about. I won't get into too much of it, but around the tomb of the Athenians in Marathon, Greece, where the soldiers are buried from the 490 battle, are olive trees. And they break off some of those branches, fashion these wreaths, gold dip them now. They weren't always gold dip. And they ship them over here to the U.S., and there's a big ceremony the week before the marathon that the Greek consulate and Greek dignitaries present to the BEA. It's a neat ceremony I've gone to several times. So to do the story, I'm thinking, well, Mike Dukakis was governor. He's a Greek American, as we all know, from the campaigns and everything. And as governor and mayor, one of your duties is to present the wreath to the winners. So I said, what a great person to talk to. He lives in Brookline. So I interviewed him. He taught at Northeastern. He's like 95 or so now. And he was telling me a great story in this area before water stops. He was running here, and before he was dating Kitty, he said that Kitty said that she came out and gave him water. I said, wow, that's really neat. Like your future girlfriend, future wife, that's really neat. What a great memory to have. He goes, I don't remember that. I'm like, do you really? He goes, yeah, I don't remember that. I go, is she making it up? He goes, hey, if Kitty tells me she gave me water, she gave me water. He goes, key to success to a good marriage, Paul. I'm like, I'll remember that. Thank you, Governor. So I always remember them around here, and especially now after she had just passed a week or so ago. And this area of Brookline, before Water Station, was Kitty coming out and beginning their future together. It was kind of neat because they're teenagers and they spent the rest of their life together. So it's a neat little story to have with our governor. Kind of a boring photo, but I included because it is the Boston Marathon, but you're only in Boston proper about 1.5 miles from this point in. And all the other towns that you've seen entering these big silver signs saying enter Natick, entering Wellesley, there isn't one entering Boston, unless they just put it in. The only thing that tells you you're in Boston is this, Boston line. And that Beacon Street in Boston is actually parallel to you. St. Mary Street is actually facing the runner. So if you're not paying attention, you don't even see this. It's just, I'm like, dude, it's the Boston Marathon. Can we have like a big sign that says, hey, you're in the city? And also, whenever I run over this is about maybe a mile before the Citgo sign, that area, about a half mile before the Mass Pike overpass that you'll see. It used to be cobblestones here at the start, at the town line. And in 1899, I believe, Lawrence Brignolio, who ended up winning, tripped over the cobblestones. It was a windy day. He tripped over it, face planted on the road, bloodied his knees. He ended up winning. But his welcome to Boston was, here's the road. I mean, I always think of that. So when I get to this area, I'm always like, I don't want to trip. I'm not winning, but I always remember that. There's no cobblestones anymore, but I always think of that. And then here it is. Here's the Citgo sign, Kenmore Square, the overpass over the Mass Pike, Fenway Park is on your right. So you get about a mile to go here. And again, another hill, because obviously overpasses and bridges always arc. But as a runner, you're like, really? I got a mile to go and you give me this? It's like, you're killing me. And years ago in the 50s, interestingly, it was a little more crooked. The city straightened this out so you could approach driving, nothing to do with the marathon. You could approach Kenmore Square straight ahead. This bridge, the roadway used to be a little crooked. So the city, fixed the bridge. Now it's a straightaway like this. But the BAA started to recognize in the 50s, everyone was getting really better timing in their races, and they couldn't figure it out. What happened was when the city straightened out this, they inadvertently shortened the course. Because, they had nothing to do with the BAA, and who thinks of that in the 50s? So the BAA goes, oh, we should measure this course. So they measure it very regularly now. But back in the 50s, who knew? Some little engineering traffic thing would alter the course a little bit. So now you go straight right into Kenmore Square, which is great because it's just 1 mile to go right here. And I tell runners, unless your leg's broken or something, you're going to make it if you're struggling. I go, the spectators alone are just going to carry you in. It is unbelievable. I took this as the 100th. That's why Ronald McDonald's sort of cheering us on. He's not always there. But it's 1 mile to go. The bus station's configured a little different here now. This is 1996. But you got a mile to go right here. It's like those travel Google things with a big thumbtack in there. There's the thumbtack. There's your finish line right there. And you have a great mile. So you go straight ahead. You take it right onto here, the old phrase, right onto Hereford, left onto Boylston, which is what you do. So it's amazing because it's all culminating here. So here's that left onto Boylston Street. Finish line is right here. The Hine Convention Center is right there where you pick up your number, the expo, kind of give you an idea where you are. But to bookend earlier story about the start from 1965 to 85, starting on that side street. Well, for those 21 years, the finish wasn't on Boylston, it was on Ring Road, for those of a certain age who may remember. So runners would take a left onto Boylston here, and after about a block or two, you would get off Boylston, and you would go on what was called Ring Road right here. So Boylston Street was right here. So you would veer off Boylston Street, run onto Ring Road in front of the Prudential Center. And all those finishes of Bill Rogers, Joan Benoit Samuelson, Bob Hall, the wheelchair athlete, all the ones that we really remember generationally happened here, not on Boylston Street, even though it's parallel. Right now, this is all sidewalk, plaza area. But for those years, it finished right here, and you ran really fast, and you had to go around the bandstand or through it. I always marvel how close the finish line was to this, right? So you have to hurdle the media. I mean, it's pretty close, but I'm sure maybe you go around. But that's where it was. It wasn't on all those black and white photos that you see in the footage of them coming down the stretch. It's here until 1985. In 1986, when John Hancock became the sponsor, they started with a 10-year deal for $1 zillion. I don't know, I think it was $10 million. And they really only had one stipulation. They didn't want to rename the marathon John Hancock Marathon or something like that. But one thing Dave D'Alessandro, the president, and John Hancock was pretty adamant about was, before you cash the check, move the finish line. We don't want the finish line in front of our competitor, the Prudential Insurance. Move it. Can you move it closer toward the John Hancock Tower? So the BAA was like, okay, we'll do that, which makes sense. It's the only reason that the finish line is where it is now. So the runners now continue down Boylston Street, instead of going onto Ring Road, which is no longer there. There is a Ring Road that cuts to Weston Hotel. That was a sort of an extension, but there is still a Ring Road from the set of lights to the Weston Hotel. That was just an extension of it where you finished. But now we finished closer, kind of right in front of the Boston Public Library right here, and we're closer to the John Hancock Tower. Since 1986, give or take a little adjustment here and there. And I was joking with some of the people at BEA when Bank of America started 2 years ago. Hancock did it for over 30, almost 40 years, amazing sponsorship. So Bank of America started, and I remember joking with someone at BEA. I said, well, for John Hancock, you moved the finish line closer to the John Hancock Tower. I said, with Bank of America, you know there's the Bank of America branch about 2 blocks down. Are you going to move the finish line? No, it's staying right there. I said, you can just move it down a couple blocks. No, we're done with moving it. And the actual finish line itself, Dave McGilvey always jokes that he thinks he's the only marathon that actually paints the finish line after the race, which is interesting because if you think about it, most main marathons, including Boston, have this big laminated finish line that they peel on, and they put it right on there for the course. They put it upside down so the runners come from the right, so when they get their photo taken, the photos are on the left. They can actually read the word finish in the photo. So that's why it's upside down as the runner sees it. But when you watch it on TV, all the cameras are up here on the photo bridge. We can read the word finish. But after the race, they just roll this up, throw it out, and that Wednesday or Thursday, depending on the weather, they paint it just for tourism to take pictures the rest of the year. That's the only reason. I did a story on that too. It was great. It was like 3 in the morning. You know, they closed off Boylston. It was just my car and 2 utility vehicles. It was great. I took a picture of my car because when am I going to park on Boylston Street, right? It was awesome. It's like, yeah, I have a parking space. But that's what they do. They paint it. And they really do a nice job. You can see it from a pretty good distance. I'll end on this photo that sort of shows you. There's the finish line. I took this from way high on the John Hancock Tower one year so you can actually see. I don't know if you can see it from space. Maybe you can. I'll have to ask Sunny Williams next time I see her. Hey, can you see the finish line? You've been on it. But this gives you an idea of Boylston Street. Here is the fire station, the second fire station. So you're coming on Hereford Street. Here's the edge of the Expo Center. So you come off Hereford Street, and then there's the Boylston Street all the way to the finish. Ring Road is right here. So there's actually, like I said, there's actually a Ring Road that goes to the Weston. But so for those 21 years, just to give you an idea, you come down Boylston and they veer off and finish right about here, which is now just even different from this big sidewalk area. This is the Lenox Hotel, Boston Public Library. So for the first 2 years, like I mentioned, there was a track right around here, which is no longer here where the marathon originally finished. Then for several years after that, the BEA Clubhouse was down here. Again, this is Exeter Street. So it was down here, and that's where it finished for several years, and then up until 65, and then 65 to 85 here, and from 86 on. So all the finish lines for a race that's almost 130 years old is basically within walking distance, which is rare. In the old days, like I said, it is Boylston Street, Newbury, Commonwealth Avenue. In the old days, the runners would come down Commonwealth Avenue, take a right onto Exeter, and finish here. That's how it was, those old black and white photos that you see, the Lenox on the left was there until the mid-60s. So from 1965 on, it's been Boylston. So it kind of gives you an idea of when you're piecing things together along the course, the start and the finish, when you see it on TV, maybe you'll start to piece together some stories to end it with this here. So if anyone has any questions of anything I brought or didn't bring up, like I said, I've written so much about it. There's tons of stories that I didn't share because we'd be here forever. Because, you know, something 130 years old, lots of stories. Anyone have any questions about anything? Because I'll be here, I'll hang out afterwards and chat. I always like hearing stories from people who have run this race or watched it as well. But I appreciate everyone coming, and thank you, and hopefully you'll enjoy it when you watch it on TV. Thank you.